Thank you. I'll call to order the Parks and Environmental Sustainability Committee of the Whole. I'm the presiding officer, David Carson. In attendance, we have Councilmember Field, Anderson, Forsyth, Kritzer, and and Councilmember Khan is online. Let me switch to my agenda. We have 4 items on the agenda. Today is May 23rd, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. in the council chambers. Our agenda is, the first item on our agenda is ordinance amending RMC chapters/title 1508 Building Code, 15.14 Mechanical Code, 15.16 Plumbing Code, and 1518 Energy Code. And with us is our Director of Planning and Community Development, Carol Helen.
Thank you, Councilmember Carson and Presiding Chair and council members this evening. We are here to bring to you the 3-year process for updating our building codes, including the residential code, the building code, the international mechanical code, and the plumbing code. The reason why we're coming tonight is I did want to have the opportunity to highlight the good work of staff who's joining me this evening. Jason Lynch, who is our building official, Travis Sally, who is our permit center manager, and who actually works on our updates to our building codes, and then Jenny Liebeck, who works on our environmental sustainability action plan. And the reason we're here tonight is just to note the advancement that these code adoptions are making to your environmental sustainability action plan goals. Specifically, the recommendation is to include an appendix that is not mandated by state at this time, but is an optional section, Appendix T, which will require solar-ready and EV-ready infrastructure for all new commercial and residential development. So with that, I just wanted to let you know that we're bringing this forward, the mandated pieces, and then also the additional Appendix T that is basically in alignment with action B12 of your ESAP, and then have the technical expert here to answer any questions you may have in the hopes of putting this on consent a week from Tuesday, on the first Tuesday in June. The reason is we have to have this in effect as of July 1 under the provisions of state law.
Very good. All right, so is there just a quick presentation or no? Okay.
Nope, we have nothing. That's it.
All right. Any questions from council? Councilmember Kritzer.
So I'm just to clarify with the piece around Appendix T, will it be all one package that we'll vote on all together, the package as presented, or is it that we're going to have to approve Appendix T to?
No, you do not have to approve them separately. Travis has drafted that into a single adoption. An ordinance has been attached as Attachment A to your materials tonight and references the adoption of Appendix T as part of the 3-year cycle adoption.
Great. Yeah, and excited to see that included here. I think that'll be great. And just curious, there's obviously a lot in here in terms of updates around energy codes. How did any changes that have happened with state building code standards show up in here around electrification?
I am going to, around electrification.
Yeah.
There's the energy code provisions, and Travis can give you just a quick summary about those changes. Oh yeah, it's sticky.
You got it.
All right. So specifically, aside from Appendix T for solar, the state adopted mandated EV charging ready. So that's in line with the ESOP. There is now in the commercial and residential codes, EV ready and EV parking stations in both codes required by this adoption.
I'll just chime in and say too, the other pieces as well. Heat pumps for space and water heating are now required for residential and commercial, which is a really big step forward for a lot of the decarbonization efforts. And just again, the progress that the state is working towards basically reducing energy use in buildings by 70% by 2031. So we're really marching towards that state goal. So really helping our local efforts here to at the local level.
Thank you. Yeah, I was getting at that piece as well. And so just curious, once we pass this, will then the requirement, even though it's the state requirement, but now it will be mirrored as adopted in our city around the heat pumps as well?
We are actually mandated to adopt those provisions of the code. The only piece that we are not mandated to comply with under state law is Appendix T, which is the solar-ready piece and solar-ready, EV-ready infrastructure piece. So it would apply even if we didn't adopt it, actually. We have no authority not to. City of Seattle is the only city that writes their own building code.
Great. And is that, so for any development application that's happening now, it's in effect?
No, it will be in effect for any development application that comes in after this code and goes into effect on July 1, because that has vesting requirements. So if somebody has already applied for a permit and they have submitted a complete building code application, they vest to the building code provisions that are in effect at the time that they apply.
Even though the state has already made that decision, and as you said,
Correct.
it would be applying, but it now will once we make this.
Because the state standard also goes into effect on July 1.
Got it. Thanks. Helpful.
Great. Council President Forsyth.
Thank you. So reading through this packet and the ordinance that has been submitted to us, there were a lot of instances where it says that lines were stricken and the RMC will apply instead. And then there was even one where it was stricken and said property maintenance is not adopted. Can you just address some of those instances?
Yeah, so that actually just eliminated some redundancy. So there was just a lot of repetitive words throughout the entire Chapter 15, and now we're just referencing back to the first time that those words are spoken. So one of those would be Board of Appeals is in every code, and we have amended that, and rather than amend it in the building code, plumbing code, mechanical code, electrical code, we reference the one code section above.
Okay.
Basically eliminated about 30 pages of code language
Got it.
by referencing up to the higher. The property maintenance code is an ICC code that is not mandated by the state to be required, and so we do not have that currently adopted. We just reference our zoning code.
Is there a reason we didn't look to consider that? I mean, I don't know what was in it, but I know it's something we've talked about on council as wanting to be interested in reviewing. So can you share a little more about that?
We in order to do that, I know we would need to look at our code enforcement officers. We currently only have 2
Right.
for the city, and the property maintenance code, because of the requirements within that code, would be kind of more than the bandwidth that those 2 code enforcement officers currently could handle.
Okay, I will do some more reading. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for staff here? Councilmember Fields?
Thank you, Councilmember Carson. Director Helen, you mentioned the length of work over the past, would you say 2 years? You were applauding staff and you said you wanted to let us know the work that has been done over some period of time. I can't remember what you said.
Oh, I was referring to all the work that Jenny has done and
okay.
on the council's work on the ESAP. On the ESAP, it's actually the work
okay.
that you've done and how this is aligned and rolls up to that work.
Okay. So in that work then, and maybe this question is to Ms. Liebeck, did we reach out to people who would be impacted by these changes, our builder community, developer community? Did we have what you would call a significant amount of public outreach and comments from that community during this process?
I'll speak to that. So really, we've had a tremendous amount of feedback from our development community, not necessarily on the optional section, on the Appendix T. The most feedback we've received is actually on the energy code updates, which are going to be the most costly changes for them to make, and those are mandated. So as a result, we have listened to their feedback. We also understand that BIAW has actually filed litigation with the state, with State Building Code Council, to ask that the implementation be delayed, especially in light of the interest rates that have been going up. To date, that's gotten re-voted on a couple of times by the State Building Code Council, and they have refused to do that. There isn't an outcome yet of that litigation. So we are continuing to move forward because we're mandated to do so until we're told otherwise. With regard to Appendix T, that piece is solar readiness, and it is actually specifically called out in your ESAP document. It's not actually mandating the installation of that material, it's mandating the capacity to put it in later. So the conduit and the space in your electrical box. So there has been information produced by King County and other jurisdictions about whether it's appropriate to add that optional section. The cost has been said to be limited. We will hear others say that it is going to be a costly installation approach. Once we require something, oftentimes the installation does become more expensive because it's just a matter of supply and demand. So I'm sure we will hear something about that. We are going to One Redmond Government Affairs on Thursday, so we will report back on any feedback that we receive at that time. Just with respect to other surrounding jurisdictions, there is a level of inconsistency about adoption of the optional appendix. So I believe Sammamish hadn't decided last time I heard, but we're tending towards not adopting it. Bellevue has adopted it as guidance. King County is guidance. Or do we have any other jurisdictions that we know have adopted it?
And Issaquah was also anticipating that they would be moving forward with adopting it.
So in the region, this is aligned with your ESAP. It's not necessarily aligned. You're out in front of many of the surrounding jurisdictions. We do anticipate probably in the next cycle it will be a mandated requirement.
And I appreciate the fact that the city is out in front. And when I say appreciate it, I mean, I really do appreciate it. I think this is important stuff. You did anticipate my follow-up question. I think I'm becoming a little too transparent. Like, what was the reaction once you did that reach out? Will you update council on anything that we learn on Thursday at the Government Affairs meeting prior to this coming to consent agenda?
Sure, I can absolutely send council an email.
A summary of whatever we think we heard. Great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Are you going to go to that meeting?
Will.
Okay.
But you're the expert. I will do my best.
I'll send a
You will
communication.
always do better, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. So just for the vast viewing audience, we've been using the acronym ESAP and not defining what it is. Environmental Sustainability Action Plan is what that means. Any other questions for staff on this? And one thing I was going to suggest, if we didn't have any more questions, is to perhaps take the monthly ESAP, any highlights, take it out of order. It's actually third on the agenda. And that way you'll all be done when you leave the table. So if without objection, we'll, if there are no other questions on this, is any highlights you wanted to, from the ESAP, from the monthly, other than what we've been provided? Oh, yeah, great.
So we can move on to that. So item number 3, is that right?
What's that? Yeah, you're
Item
number
number
3.
three? Okay,
So
perfect.
might as well, you're already here.
Perfect, yes.
Oh, yeah, any problems with the item number 1 going on consent? I was just thinking it might be, because it is a kind of a big deal, some of the code that we're adopting, that it might be new, interesting to put on new business if you had any updates. So I guess your choice if council doesn't have any problems with that. So, okay, consent unless there's something interesting to, great. All right, thank you very much. Okay,
Wait,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. What just happened?
So the staff wanted for us to put this on the consent agenda, and But I was suggesting if there are any developments, then maybe putting it on as new business, if there's an update that, as you mentioned in your request, to maybe have it as new business if something interesting has happened and we should be apprised of it. So it would be a way to
So are we waiting to see if this goes on consent?
it'll go on consent unless staff has a reason to pull it and put it on new business.
Or we can always pull it?
Yeah, of course we could,
Great,
yeah.
thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, sorry, Jenny, go ahead.
All good. Yeah, so good afternoon, council. So this is an item, I feel really loud. This item includes the monthly environmental sustainability action plan update. So again, a little bit of out of order on our agenda, but so a full overview is outlined in attachment A, but I did want to touch on just a few highlights for council and the public this evening. So first, really excited to share that our Energy Smart Eastside program was awarded a $1 million grant from the Department of Commerce through their Building Electrification Grant Program. So this will allow the 5 Eastside cities who are working together on the heat pump program or community heat pump program to basically complete more installations and also pilot a heat pump water heater installation, and then just continue to grow the program. So this is a really great, just a great opportunity to continue to show the leadership of this program and how we are really creating a model that can be expanded across the region. And then I also wanted to highlight, there was an image that was in the attachment, but myself and a representative from Fire, we recently participated in a tour of the Snohomish Public Utilities microgrid, or Snohomish PUD microgrid up in Arlington. This was a really great opportunity for us to learn, just gather some lessons learned and best practices around battery safety, which is just a growing concern in general as we start to see batteries become more kind of common across our communities. So this was also a really great opportunity to connect with representatives from across the state. There were folks from Department of Commerce, from PSC, and some experts from the Federal National Laboratory. And so we were just, again, able to learn and share some of those best practices as we explore battery storage for both city operations and, again, see more battery storage projects installed across the community. So it's a really, really great opportunity. And then finally, I did want to just note the leaf blower questionnaire. So this is a priority for council. So again, that questionnaire is live on the city's Let's Connect page. We did extend that. I know even in the packet here, we had noted a May 31st deadline for that. We've extended that to June 15th, just to allow us more time to do some really targeted outreach to the landscape community. So we're doing mailers and things like that to make sure we're getting a really broad perspective in that response and can bring you back the best data to inform next steps. So that's all I wanted to touch on. Again, there are more highlights there. I encourage you to take a look and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Yeah, so go ahead, Council President.
Thanks. Was really interested in seeing about the PUD battery storage field trip that everyone took. Is that in response to the fire truck that we're getting and hopeful battery storage functionality that we may end up doing?
Yeah, well, it's kind of multi-pronged, if you will. So we also applied for a grant from the Department of Commerce to evaluate solar and storage opportunities for city properties. And so as we were doing our due diligence from that work, we were actually able to connect with the folks at Snohomish PUD. And so it was very much a learning experience. And then also, again, from the safety perspective, which is why some representatives from Fire came. So it was kind of a little bit, it actually didn't have anything to do with the EV fire apparatus, but more just, again, how do we stay ahead of some of this work and just make sure that we're tracking the trends. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I know the batteries potential for fire there is a big concern since you kind of just have to let them burn out at the current moment.
Yeah. And, one of the big takeaways from that was that some of the larger batteries are less of a concern. I mean, that there's a lot of safety precautions in place to help manage some of those fires, and I definitely we should hear from Fire on their perspective. But one of the big takeaways too is just the challenges with small, like micromobility devices, being one of the bigger challenges that they're trying to work through. So it was very interesting just to learn that and understand how the fire community in general is working to kind of work through this growing trend. So,
Nice. Very interesting. Thank you.
Great, Councilmember Kritzer.
I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the leaf blower questionnaire, and in designing that questionnaire, since I imagine it's aimed at looking at eventually doing some sort of leaf blower related policy, were you looking at policies that were passed by cities like Seattle, or kind of in terms of what we're aiming towards, kind of getting people's feedback on? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we definitely, as we've kind of done our due diligence with this, looked across at how other jurisdictions are approaching. So we know Seattle, for instance, has passed some policy. Washington, D.C., Kirkland is actually now exploring some policy as well. But it's not just in terms of policy regulating or things like that, but are there other incentives or programs that we can provide to help folks make that transition as well? So we're really trying to kind of look holistically and really understand, again, from both the community perspective and those who work in the industry, how they're viewing this transition and the technology. So we are definitely not going into it with any perceived view of what those policies should look like, but just, again, wanting to understand from the community where they're how they view this issue, so we can understand the best gaps and how we can support more use of electrified equipment. So.
Well, can I do one
Yeah,
follow-up?
of course.
I appreciate you following up and on multiple emails. We've, I think, forwarded you from the public that have asked about this question, and cool to see the Environmental Sustainability Council weighing in on that. One question, I know when we were doing the zero carbon strategy, we brought up whether just for municipal operations, we would want to move away from gas-powered leaf blowers. And I think that was one that was like on the to-do list, but hadn't quite made it into the plan, but was something that we wanted to be considered. And I'm just curious on that end, if there's any movement there.
Yeah, and we've had some great conversations, and actually Dave is a great representative to speak to that from the parks perspective. But, right now our teams are doing a ton of evaluation and having demos of all of the equipment, and they're replacing where they can. But we need to make sure that the technology and the equipment aligns with the operational needs. And right now we're just not seeing that alignment. But again, our staff is so on it. Our parks department and our public works folks are constantly kind of in touch with vendors to say, like, okay, how is the technology looking? Right now, I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback, and Dave, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that we're hearing is, especially for like the leaf blower, the backpacks, they're just too heavy for our staff who are using these for hours and hours on end, right? So we need the weight of those to come down to be more on par with the current gas-powered leaf blowers. But again, they are integrating like smaller electric leaf blowers in applications where it works, so like downtown park, for instance. And so, yeah, maximizing every opportunity they can. And then the other parallel effort, too, is the vegetation, I'm going to get the name wrong, the vegetation management plan that's aligned with the city's sustainability goals. So that work is beginning, and we'll also look at some of those operational practices as well. So, but again, Dave will be the best one to be able to speak to that if we have more questions, and happy to add more to future updates too.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Fields.
So in all of these conversations, is there any indication? Let me start with a premise. I find it interesting that we've arrived on leaf blowers. There's all kinds of other things that are noisy, emit carbon emissions, Dave's motorcycle, for example. Or, there are other things in our world that sort of offend the noise pollution and the carbon emissions. Why is it we're so focused on leaf blowers? And are we learning anything about leaf blower and this rising technology that we think that will apply to other things, other technologies in our society?
Yeah, so this is actually a request from council. So this actually is not part of the ESAP. There's nothing in the ESAP around leaf blowers specifically. So that's why we're really starting with some due diligence and asking the community, because we weren't able to do that due diligence through the ESAP development process. So yeah, so I'll just leave it at that.
So the focus is because council asked you to focus, and the fact that other jurisdictions are looking at it is incidental, or it's not a driving trend here necessarily. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. So one of the concerns I have, and yeah, we obviously aren't close to making any kind of decisions on policy decisions, but just the enforceability issue of this, to me, I mean, you know, I work from home, and it's like, you know, I'll hear one neighbor's got the landscapers over, and so you'll hear the leaf blowers going. And I think the biggest reason, to Steve's point, is they're super loud. And I mean, some of them are very loud, and they do disrupt your concentration and so forth. But my concern is, like, you know, we have, back to the earlier conversation, we have two code compliance officers. What happened, I mean, I'm always for making sure that we don't pass something we can't enforce, because that's actually worse than not passing it at all, because we say not to do it, and yet we have no means by which to enforce it, which to me is just the worst thing you can do as a municipality is, you know, quote, outlaw something, and yet there's no consequence for using it still. So I just want, when we get to the point of making a decision, for it to be something that is actually doable. And so to me, that is really, I think, the biggest issue with actually instituting something like this, because I mean, I don't love listening to them when they fire up around my house any more than anybody else does. And I wish there was, like, you could just, okay, leaf blowers only on Monday or something. But, you know, you can't do that. So I just want to make sure that if we do something, that we keep our eye on the ball, that you got to be able to enforce it. And if you can't enforce it, it's actually worse than instituting something, you know, and not, it's like we do this with our temporary sign code. We have so many, and I was there for that, and we haven't revisited it since, but there are so many non-compliant signs in the city, but our code compliance officers can't possibly get to all of them. So, and I voted not to institute that strict of a policy because of that very reason. So I just want to make sure when we go forward with this, if we do, that we think about that. So, great, thank you. Councilmember Kritzer.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think we will want to be thoughtful if we're going to approach a policy on it. Just to answer the question, I think in research that I've seen, I think one of the big reasons on the environmental side is that the emissions from gas-powered leaf blowers are multiple times what you get from a car so for like 1 hour of a leaf blower is, I think, estimated like the same as 8 hours of emissions of driving a car. So something like that in terms of that impact. So that's why I think some jurisdictions have taken action on this, just being like one. It's obviously not the only and biggest emitter, since cars themselves and buildings and other types of things are big contributors to carbon emissions, but it's an interesting one to be able to look at in addition to some of the noise pollution complaints we had, so.
Well, no, and I think the other issue is, as you say, you can actually smell them much more readily than any car going by. So, Councilmember Forsyth.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Kritzer, for that, because I was going to add that note, but just excited that you're looking at the policy that Kirkland is pulling together, because I think it, so far what I know of it, it is a very equitable approach to electrifying leaf blowers. They're talking with the landscapers. They're doing a lot of research and making sure that they're bringing community along so that they're not inadvertently harming small businesses. And they're really being mindful about having a staggered rollout to it. So I think just to address any of the concerns that we may have here, I think that's a great approach that they're taking. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other questions, we will move back to item number 2. Thank you so much for the update. And that is the 2023 Derby Days overview. And we have our Parks and Recreation Director Laureen Hamilton coming to join us, and crew.
Yes, good afternoon. We are here to share a program update for the 2023 Derby Days. I am joined with today by Zach Hoovener, our Deputy Director for our Parks Department, as well as Brittany Pratt, our new Recreation Business Manager, who will share this update.
All right. So today I'm going to talk to you about 2023 Derby Days overview. This year's event takes place on July 14 and 15 right here on City Hall's municipal campus. And it's going to feature all the things you see in your memo: carnival, as per usual, main stage, musical entertainment, food booths and trucks, the beer and wine garden, business and community booths, the craft market with Urban Craft Uprising like we had last year, though in a slightly different location, kids bike parade, Derby Days Grand Parade, bike races at the Jerry Baker Memorial Velodrome. This year expanded to be both on Friday night and some options on Saturday as well, and the drone light show on Saturday night, as well as the Fire Foundation's pancake breakfast. As we've been planning, various teams, sponsors, and partners are continuing to meet to create this event for the city. We have some really great key partnerships in the King County Library System, Ben Franklin. We're working with all of our owners around this area, like Unicy, Nelson Legacy Group, in order to help use their spaces. Overlake Christian Church, Urban Craft Uprising, Artist Home, Jerry Baker Memorial Velodrome, Hope Link, Redmond Bar and Grill, and Vala East Side. And this year we have 13, and actually growing as of this afternoon, sponsors for a total of $84,000 this year, helping to fund the event. And as planning continues, we're developing an incident action plan with emergency management to ensure the safety of all the participants. And then as far as timeline is concerned, where we are, we're kind of switching gears into the part where we're really communicating to participants. Right about now, actually, we just sort of flipped over the website, so we're kind of nearing the end of the deadlines for business involvement, sponsors, activity boosts, that kind of thing. But if you know anyone who wants to be in the parade, we got spots. Send them my way. As far as budget is concerned, the cost of this year's event right now is sitting right about at $178,000, and that is funded in three ways. $50,000 is from LTAC, $84,000 from sponsorships, like you heard, and then $44,000 actually comes in from the event fees, leases, carnival, all those types of things. And then lastly, as far as council involvement in Derby Days, you're actually going to receive a few options in your email, probably tomorrow, if not by the end of the week, that'll include things like your council booth, walking in the parade, the pancake breakfast, and other info. And with that, what questions do you have for me?
Questions from council? Mr. Fields.
Got a couple questions on sponsors. How does this year so far compare to prior to the pandemic?
Prior to the pandemic, I wasn't in this role. I will say in comparison to last year, and you can probably speak to the prior to the pandemic, but in comparison to last year, this was a lot more difficult to acquire the sponsors. We really kind of struggled, and why we're at the amount we're at this year is simply because we got a really large sponsor in Amazon that we weren't expecting this year. Otherwise, the smaller ones that we usually get have been a lot more slow to acquire. And do you want to speak to the other piece?
Yeah, prior to the event, staff and I actually was not in that position for Derby Days in 2019, but there was a lot more focus on in-kind sponsorships as opposed to cash sponsorships. And so I would say that our sponsorships have increased since prior to the pandemic, and there's been a larger focus on figuring out where those partnerships can be to have some of that in-kind sponsorships, but also really looking for sponsors who can bring money forward to sponsor the various parts of the event as well.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have a set fee, like to be a sponsor, you can be a gold sponsor or a platinum sponsor or something like that?
It's not really set. There is sort of, most people are coming and they want a booth, and that's like the sponsorship thing that they want. And so what does that minimum level look like? And then really I work with people to tailor to their marketing needs.
I'm sorry.
To whatever their marketing needs are that they're
Most
looking for.
sponsorships that come to us come from marketing budgets as opposed to philanthropy budgets. When they partner with us from the city, they look at it as a marketing opportunity, want their logos on our collateral, want to have a space at the event, want shout outs on the main stage and things like that. So naturally, the higher the sponsorship, the more of those benefits that come forward. So, and the smaller we really try to work, because we also want them to be a part of the event and part of our community.
Yep, of course. So those are the questions I have. Just quick comment. I mean, Derby Days is, especially now with the drone, is arguably one of our biggest and more well-known events. I think if I was in marketing, which I've never been, I would think that this would be a good thing to sponsor, and I think that it would be money well spent. So I don't know how we persuade our neighboring business community to for their own advantages, participate in this, but I hope that we can continue to improve or increase that participation. Thank you.
Great. Oh, Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you. Excited about Derby Days. Excited for the drone show again. Curious when we're going to bring back the community bike ride.
To which you mean?
Actual community members being able to engage in an event that is not as exclusive as the racing at the velodrome. Love the velodrome, love the racing, super fun to watch. The comment we heard about the bike race, the criterion that we used to have was that it was exclusive, and so we just ratcheted up to an even more exclusive event. So partnerships with Cascade, partnerships with other bike partners that could potentially bring it back down to that community level that it was initially established as.
Absolutely. So we actually did meet with all of those people this year. And so we're looking for partners, and we haven't been able to find someone who's willing to step in and help us with that yet. So we've been working on it, and so far it's not going to happen this year. I think at this point we can safely say that. But yeah, everyone they didn't have the capacity for that this year.
So do you know what some of the biggest barriers are that maybe we can start brainstorming ways to help?
What I was told was staffing resources.
Staffing resources?
Yeah, just getting people involved to do that.
To run the event or to do safety, or how's that?
All of the above.
Okay.
And when we engage in a race or a community bike ride of that size, it also does trigger additional public safety needs. And so it does also increase cost around that. And so it's really important to ensure that we're able to have whoever that partner is be able to help cover, not necessarily the public safety piece, but things like barriers and all of those pieces that come with that part of the event was one of the reasons why we had to reduce out the criterium a few years back. And so it's a multi-pronged issue that we are really more than willing and happy to work through with a partner. But at this point, like Brittany said, even when we have preliminary conversations, they just don't feel that they have the capacity to take it on. Okay. If you have connections, I know that we've chatted about this a couple different times. If you have folks within those organizations and you can help make connections that can make those things happen, we will gladly take them, because we would love to see that portion back as well. When staff looked at doing it for last year, it became very prohibitive with the amount of traffic control and things that were going to be needed for that.
So one thing that on the traffic control side that I just recently had some conversations with some of our emergency responder volunteer folks is that used to be something that they would be engaged with helping with, and that was something that I hadn't crossed my mind. So I don't know if that's some conversations that we've had internally or not, but just wanted to share that feedback that I most recently heard. So
thank you.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Anything else that we need to know about? You ordered good weather?
Sorry?
You ordered good weather for the
I
event?
did, in fact.
Okay, good. All right,
Made it a
that's-
double. Mhm.
Not too hot, not raining?
That's the
Perfect.
goal.
All right, perfect.
I think the only other note for council to just know as we approach is the footprint is going to look very different. The fence is not moving for the building. It can't move for the event, and neither can the fence. And so the footprint for the event will feel very different this year. So just know that we are doing everything we can to have a really great community event on a slightly smaller footprint. And utilizing all the space that we can to, have a really great Derby Days weekend. So
Well-
just feel like that's an important note to make.
Yeah, we'll also be using the van pools again to go from Redmond Town Center to the Velodrome and City Hall. So hopefully people can park at those different areas and commute in.
That'll be like a circulator kind of van.
We partner with Microsoft Shuttles,
Oh, very good, okay,
which is what we've done for a very, very long time.
good.
It's one of their many
Great.
benefits.
Councilmember Kritzer.
Actually, I'm just remembering that last year, the drone show was right above the site where the senior center is being built now. Where is it going to be this year?
It's going to be in the same spot because of where they have to take off. So they're going to take off from those pickleball fields that are, or courts that are not being used. I'm not a sports person, y'all. Pickleball courts, yeah, go sports ball, yeah.
From my understanding of the FAA regulations, the lowest drone when it rises up will be about 10 stories tall.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Any other questions on this? Well, I'm looking forward to it, and thank you for it in good weather.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much. And our last item on the agenda is item number 4, is approval of the consultant agreement in the amount of $969,416 with the Miller Hull Partnership for the Maintenance and Operations Center Master Plan. And our Public Works Director, Aaron Burt, is here to discuss this.
Thanks for allowing us to walk onto the committee here. Super excited for this. This is the first phase of many that will be engaging with council on the rebuild of the Maintenance and Operations Center.
I think this could be properly couched in environmental sustainability because a lot of what you have to do has impacts there. So.
Absolutely, and it's also in a deep partnership with our partners at Parks that share the facility out there. Public Works is taking the lead on getting this project built. So this, during the budget process last year, excuse me, council approved $500,000 to begin initial design. When we engaged and put this out for an RFP, we made some decisions internally to essentially speed up this process. A master planning process at one time was undertaken, I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago. The outcomes of that master planning process did not meet basically the operational needs for the city on the identification of a project. Kind of outside of scope, what they came up with was a little too much for what the city was looking to build at the time. So when we met with Miller Hull and the other groups that made this initial presentation, we gave them some better parameters. For example, stated that looking at that 9-acre site, what our preference would be, rather than often when you go and do a major rebuild on this, you'll go in terms of phasing the project. So you build part of the campus, move everything into that, build again. A lot of cost, a lot of logistics, a lot of concern with that, and potential for cost overruns. So one of the parameters we gave was we want to scrape the site clean and start fresh. That will have an operational impact for us as we look to spread out operations over other parts of the city, temporary facilities during the construction period. But in the end, that's actually going to save us money and save us time to get this facility built. So that had some additional costs for this master planning process. With that as well, we asked them to take a hard look at all the permitting requirements up front and what that would be to get this project through. Taking a look at the consolidation of staff out at that location. So consolidating not only our fire and normal fleet operations and maintenance, but also potentially looking at moving the whole public works staff out to work. Our current staff here at City Hall, put everybody in one location. Also the combination of shared administrative space between Public Works and Parks in that location as well. And also important for us is to come back with a recommendation on what type of contracting we should use, design, bid, build, general contractor, things like that, making that recommendation. So we're asking quite a bit from this contract, but we're very confident that Miller Hull will be able to deliver. It's about 4,000 hours in the contract, and we should have a master plan that is scoped and gives us a roadmap for success by the end of the year, at which time then we would come back and move into the next phase of formalized design and permitting. Our intent is to get this designed and ready to break ground by the end of 2025. And we're anticipating probably about a 2.5 year construction period on that. So on the financing side of the house, we did have $500,000 in operations. What we're asking to do is add another $470,000 to this contract. We've talked with finance. What we'll do is we have $7 million allocated in the CIP in the next biennium, but we're going to move some of that money up to cover this cost difference and taking that contract to about $1 million to get this work done.
All right. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Fields. Up your mic. There you go.
I read this a couple of times, and I think generally you've answered the question, but I've got at least 3 questions here. First one is, you've moved the money up. Is the money there to be moved up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're underspent in some aspects of the capital program, so we'll be able to cover it.
So whatever funding plan we had, there was acceleration at least of the anticipated revenue stream also.
Correct.
Right?
And finance will come back at a later date to make that budget adjustment.
So I'm not clear. I think there's a couple of things here. One is there was some scope not originally in the master plan that was intended later in the total of the 6-year plan, that you're moving that scope, accelerating that scope. Is that correct?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, I would say no. So in a master planning process, it's how we define and what we want for those deliverables. So normally in a master plan process, you go through a long, drawn-out option scenario. They come back 3 or 4 options, then you neck that down maybe to 2 preferred options, and then you make a final decision on the direction you want to go. Because there's been enough work done on this and enough need and understanding of what the needs are for the facility, we basically artificially constrain those options looking at one major option. So what the master plan will deliver for us is the aspect of not necessarily a flushed out design, but it will have a concept for us to build off of that then you can pivot off of if there are changing needs. But then also the various parameters of what we need to move into in 2024 to begin the design and permitting process. So they're basically defining those parameters in terms of what we need to be prepared for.
So what I'm getting at is pay now, save later.
Yes, in many different facets, yes.
So, and what I'm trying to do is distinguish between pay more now and also pay more later, meaning I heard you, there was some discussion about the overall expectation of the total scope and not just this first phase scope. So at some point you're going to learn enough to know how good your estimates are for the construction. And is there anything in the work that you've done or doing that would give us an earlier indication that 6-year estimate is not going to grow by orders of magnitude? I'm trying to distinguish between, I heard what you said, that you're in a better position to do more. That's what I think you said. But does that mean that the city should expect that we won't recover this through cost savings, or we will have to come up with additional funding on the later back end?
So in the next, I think it was in the 25-26 biennium, there was almost, or maybe it's 24 is when we were recognizing those money, about $7.5 million for design. So essentially, in this case, we're borrowing against that $7.5 million in 2023 to begin and flush out the master planning process. That, one of the other deliverables that will get us is a very solid and flushed out cost estimation. Now, the budget that I think we were originally looking at was close to $100 million investment on this. And that's one of the parameters that we talked about with Miller Hole as we went into this, that yes, we're potentially looking at a $100 million expenditure, but it's not our intent to spend $100 million on this project.
Okay. I think the answer for me, and I appreciate what you're saying, but the answer for me is we don't know. I understand that the 100 million may be more than, you're being conservative, you're being prudent, you're being exceptional in your estimating to make sure that the city doesn't get caught by a big surprise later on. But I'm not real clear yet. When you say borrow from the design, I'm not clear that that reduces the cost of the design. Borrowing the money, that's easy.
So we're not even into design yet, and I'm sorry if my terminology is not clear. This is an aspect where we have $500,000 allocated in 2023. We have $7.5 million allocated for further design work in 24, I would say. Essentially, we're moving up those funds to 2023 to cover the cost of this expanded scope for the master plan.
Got that part.
Yeah.
I
So
got the
next
part that
year-
we're moving up the funds,
Yeah.
but we may, what I was asking is, do we think we're mitigating or moving up some of the costs? And I don't think you know that. I don't think you have an answer for that,
No,
which is
probably-
fine, I get
Probably I
it.
don't, yeah,
Okay.
but,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you for some of that back and forth. I have two questions. One is if you can explain a little bit about why the first portion was in the operating budget and the next portion will come from the capital budget. That would be helpful. And then also I wanted to get some feedback on, with a reduction in the number of options, will there be some expectation for a streamlined community engagement process in this?
So how the money got allocated, Councilmember, I don't know on why 500,000 was put into operations to begin with and not in the CIP, but we can track that down and get you that information for
Great.
sure.
Thank you.
There will be a community engagement process on this based on where the facility is. The impact on the community as a whole in terms of residential or other aspects isn't as high as it would be if it was in, for example, here on the campus. But part of that process will be to go out and basically show and tell on what the initial concepts are, especially on the aspects that we're looking at. And is one of the reasons why we picked Miller Hole. They have a very good track record on terms of designing these facilities with a high level of environmental sustainability. And that's definitely baking that in early in the process on this.
Great, and I'm not sure if I either stated this or you caught this piece of it, but will we be expecting a lower cost in that planning process with a little bit of less community engagement?
Yes, and I would also say reduce cost in terms of staff engagement. So we're gleaming a lot of good information from what had been done previously, and then the internal working groups that we have right now to inform the process going forward over the course of the next 6 months.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Forsyth and Kritzer.
Thank you. Well, do you foresee any impacts to other work that is in the pipeline as we currently hear often about moving something up means something else falls aside? Do you see any of those issues with this?
No, we had a project manager assigned for this project already to begin with, so this is just an aspect of moving money. The majority, or I should say the bulk of the lift is on Miller Hole and their subcontractors on this work, so it's not going to impact delivery on any other project that we have.
Great, that's what I figured. And then will we potentially be seeing for the delivery method aspect of this, if this goes to GCCM, is that another council-approved amendment?
It would be. So once we get to that point, we'd come back with a contract for design and the aspect of, pre-design, pre-construction, that would also then adopt the bidding method that we'd be looking to do.
And only if we go with GCCM on that? Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Councilmember Kritzer.
Just a question about what you mentioned about the decision to fully start from scratch versus updating the existing building. Can you speak just a little bit to how we've gotten to that point and whether when we initially started this project, we thought that was where we were going to head?
So you've been out to the MOC, right? Okay. It's a mess. And with the spread out functionality of the different functions across that site, and then the type of facility that we're looking to build, the concept of trying to phase that based on our initial assessment, and then based on the work that had done previously. In the previous master planning effort, it's my understanding that with this concept of replace in kind and phase, that project was estimated to be about $175 million. Whether or not that was a realistic cost, I wasn't here, but that was just some of the materials that I read. So in putting this constraint on that, we're recognizing that if we can start fresh on a clean slate, it allows us to begin building a facility from the ground up in the beginning that gives us that flexibility and create that environment that we want to build. What we're talking about and what we've put out to Miller Hole basically is, hey, look, we're making a generational investment here. We're not that quick on replacing major facilities like this. I mean, it's just the reality. And we're looking to build a 75 to 100-year facility. Hopefully, it would get replaced before then, but that's kind of the mentality that we're taking on this. And in order to create that type of facility, we realized we needed to start fresh out there. So that was our approach. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So the one quick question I had was around this consultant agreement, and does it, is part of the scope of this to envision how we manage the operations in the meantime while, is that part of this?
Yeah, we've asked them to kind of help lean forward on that, to take a look at it. We'll also be working with our partners in parks here to begin creating kind of basically an interdepartmental team to begin scoping out what that could or would look like, identification of current facilities that we have. It may involve us, renting a piece of land for a short-term lease and putting up a fest tent for operations. I mean, it won't necessarily be pretty, but it will be practical for us to get us to the facility that we need.
And it will save lots of money based on.
By not phasing.
By not phasing.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, it's like traffic control on a traffic project.
So one of the firms that presented talked about them building out a maintenance facility in the city of Tukwila. And they showed us 11 slides that took them through 9 different phases of moving between this building and another building and here and there. And when they got done, and it wasn't Miller Hole, it was another firm, but when they got done, we were like, oh, okay, well, it's practical. How long is that going to take? And they said 20 years. Now, that was a different story with Tukwila because they didn't have all the money available up front, but it really showed the complication of certain functions moving 3 different times within this footprint in order to accommodate this build out how they saw it. So once we saw that, it kind of sparked, it's probably not the best way for us to go if we can do this other means.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Mr. Fields, and we're almost out of time.
Yep, I'll be quick. So quick follow-up to Councilmember Forsyth. I heard her question maybe different than how it was intended. What I had thought was asked, and I think that's sort of what I had started to get at, is you're moving up this money, or you're taking this money out of the CIP because it's there. When we do this budgeting process, we always talk about all these constraints, and we can only do so much, yet from a council perspective, all of a sudden this money is available. And that's why I was asking you, is this part of the MOC money? It doesn't sound like it is. So the question, I think, is legitimate. Is there something else that potentially gets delayed? And we always, the council that I've been on always wants to know these impacts. When we talked about the senior center, we always asked, how will this impact the MOC? Now we're talking about the MOC. The question is, how will that impact some of the other things that we have on the table? So is there a potential impact, or will you have an opportunity to identify those impacts and budget changes for us before the budget season begins next time?
For the next budget season, yeah, I don't see any impact. This is $470,000 that right now, if you look at my capital budget based on where we are in the design bid build cycle, I mean, I'm probably at 25% expended here at the end of May because we're still bringing things online. Majority of the projects that we have won't go into construction until next year. And then with contingency and other funds available, we'll have this money available. It won't impact any other listed project.
Great, thank you. All right, I see no other questions. So thank you for the update.
You bet.
And what the ask of council is
We're looking for consent
consent
on
June
the 6th. Yep.
Okay. Any issues with that going on consent to get this? Okay, so yeah, any follow-ups can go directly to the director.
Yes, and we'll plan on doing probably a check back at 2PW probably in late summer, once we've had a chance to get the master planning process underway and talk about some of the deliverables on that as well.
So it's expected to go through the end of the year, roughly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you for your time and attention. We are at the end of our agenda, so without objection, we are adjourned.